Anyway, how's everyone doing this morning?
Good.
Awesome.
Pretty good.
Looking forward to getting your book, George. When is that going to be?
Shantae unfortunately took a fall, so it's going to go. They're going out this week, Mike. They're going
When
out
you
this
say
week.
going out, does that mean I'm on a mailing list? I would receive a copy. Is that
I
what
have
that means?
advanced copies, and you, sir, are on the list.
Oh,
So,
this week it's going to go out.
yep, it's going out regular
Nice.
mail, but it's
Regular.
going out this week.
So I'll
So,
get it next month.
George, I'll be waiting for the electronic version.
okay, Joseph, that's coming up as well.
Happy
Uh,
to hand the hard copy out to clients, but I will never carry around books anymore.
My library. It's funny. I have hard copies of everything. I wave them around. I look at them, but I do most of my reading on this thing.
Yeah, just when you're as mobile as some of us are really mobile, so carrying books around is really not a pleasant thing.
Yeah. Well, yes. Sid and she always has a couple of books when we travel. And she's like, aren't you going to bring anything to read? I'm like, baby, I have the sum of human knowledge at my fingertips. It's going to be okay. So, hey guys, they're doing the work, not some work, the work to release lead generator. I got a ping into the engineers, but like it's happening sort of now, today, tomorrow, and you guys will be the first to know. So that's really exciting. And I've tested it a bunch. There are a couple of other enhancements that going along with that. Whenever there's a software release, as there is when we do Windows, as there is when we update our phones, when there's a software release, I apologize if there are any hiccups. The guys are all over it. Shouldn't be, but there may be. And we're also going to be, well, there are a couple of other things that are being rolled out that you won't see, but that are behind the scenes that are improvements in terms of saving information. And Mike, I know it's top of your list. On the dev map is embedding a pixel so that we can see when someone started and doesn't finish, we can try to connect you with them anyhow. That would be, and let's just look at the quality of the lead. Hot lead is someone who fills it out. So, and I went, and the engineers had gone, I had over engineered the report and then they added to it. I have now stripped it down to something. It needs to be intriguing for our clients, right? This is interesting. The concept of strategic capacity. I can see how, my business would be easier to run if I was answering yes to all these questions. That's what we want to get them thinking. And I wonder how this impacts the value of my business. So,
George, you're talking about Clarity One here, right?
Clarity One. Yep. Clarity One lead generator. And then, and what's cool, guys, is moving someone. So you put out lead generator. It's its own URL. They come in. You guys all have the paid version, the full version of Clarity. So for you to move someone into Clarity 1, Clarity 2 is literally the click of one button. And you click on Clarity 1, you add the business information, business name, revenue, EBITDA, and you click next and submit, and you are, we're off to the races. So moving someone forward is wickedly easy. It's one button. And so I'm thrilled about that. And yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited. And then, there are a couple of additions we'll make to Clarity 2, and we'll take a breath and we'll decide as a community what we need. Any questions about that? There's an update. Publish this to you too. And then we'll talk about some, we are not a marketing agency by any stretch of the imagination, but we'll talk about some guidance on using lead generator for generating leads. It's a tough line, not a tough line, but it's a line I don't want to cross. I don't want people saying, listen, I've had it out there. I used your materials and I'm not getting any leads. It's like, there are so many variables there. I think that's why Value Builder, for example, ended up just bringing the whole show in-house. And that's not what we are. So
yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. On that point, George, in terms of marketing, I had, a thought. Number one, it might be worthwhile to put a poll out into the community, get a sense in terms of for most of us that are using and applying these tools. First of all, what are the typical size of the clients that we're working with, and also you get a sense, if you're working with a couple of different ranges, where do you find that the Clarity 1 or Clarity 2 is having the greatest success? And I think that'll also help us, from a marketing perspective. Because I think if you make the language in your marketing more pointed towards the customers that are going to have the most interest, it might be helpful.
Yes, that's great. That's a great suggestion, Joseph, and easy
and
to do.
It can be anonymous, right? We want it to be anonymous, so no one has to say, where the source is from or whatever, but give a sense, typical client size, how many clients in each category, which one seems to be the most successful. I think that'll be helpful for us.
Consider it done. That luckily that's easy to do. It'll be crisp. It's going to be short and to the point. Okay.
If anybody wants to kind of take it beyond that and make into, we'll do a little research project from a marketing perspective, so then we can certainly do that. I'd be happy to spearhead that if anybody wants to do that.
That's a heck of an offer, Joseph. Thank you. Just taking a couple of notes. Okay, somebody.
It's all recorded.
Exactly. It is all recorded.
George, could you clarify what happens after lead gen when you get into Clarity One?
Sure.
I think I know, but just clarify.
Here, you know what? Bear with me one sec. I'll share my screen and I will show you. Not that. No reports. What do we got here? Okay. So let me that one won't. Bear with me one sec, Steve. I'm just making sure okay. I can't show you because I've gone and already upgraded everyone to Clarity One in my testing. But the bottom line is, Steve, is your client is here. I will share my screen because we can do this. Chad, how are you, man?
Hey, good.
So let's get this out of the way. Okay, this is a demo company. All right. So it's very straightforward. If I can get our pictures out of the way. So you'll be able to go to in fact, I'm going to pause share here. Just bear with me one sec, guys. When I do things on the hoof, our pictures are in the way. I'm just going to log into my demo company. Okay, very cool. So here, resume share. Okay, so you're inside my dashboard for the demo company. You can see we've been doing a bunch of testing. So let's take this business right here. So this business, and it'll be flagged for you. This business has completed lead generator. Okay, I actually haven't gone and tested, but I assume this is the team. So lead generator is the survey, right? All these questions and the client intake form. All right. And then it doesn't say next, it says submit. And then the client gets a report and you get a report. Now, as people you guys are on the inside, you're subscribers. So to upgrade this person into one, Steve, this is all you'll do. You'll be like, oh, look, this person completed lead generator. Hey, you want to see what it has to do with your business? Can I help you understand your report? Whatever your next step is, this is all you do. You click Clarity One, you click business information. And okay, so this one's already been completed. And then you just it's that easy. You put in this information, you click next, and it generates your report. You always click submit. Always click submit. But that's it, Steve. It's that easy. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
So what did the report? No, because I'm slow. So what did the report look like out of lead gen as opposed to out of Clarity One?
So the guys are finishing coding it. I stripped it down. So I don't have the final version. It's very simple. At the top, it gives some basic information, three bullet points. It's in a very approachable tone. You guys know the brand tone. And then it shows their strategic capacity, their goals. There's a little more explanatory information. And then it shows all of the questions and their answers. And we're going to add that question and answer section to the level 1 report. So if you are doing an initial client interview, you have those questions and answers in a list. So Steve, it's basically, how's your business? How does your business score for growing profits and transferable value? A very high-level explanation of strategic capacity. It's designed. The language is designed to be intriguing, right? Informative, to leave. It doesn't give away the farm. That's the report. It's very straightforward. Because we're not asking for their business revenue. We're not asking for that touchy-feely information. The stuff they feel is very closely held. We can't obviously calculate a value for the business. So
I've got a business owner that's sitting on a proposal. So you'd advise me then to send, whenever this gets published later today or tomorrow, shoot this over to them.
You sure can. Absolutely. You send it over and say, if you want to know, that's the next step is, what's your ask? What's your call to action, right?
Well, in my case, this would be, take a look at this. This is a very, very it's the forerunner of the other work that we talked about in the proposal.
Yeah, let's get a preliminary view. Let's do a preliminary analysis of your strategic capacity. That strategic capacity really comes down to how easily, how well defined and developed are your people, processes, and cash flow to move the business forward. And that's the name of the game. Nothing's changed. So if you're trying to give someone a preliminary feel, hey, here's how I, Steve Duke, come to the table. Here's the type of information on which I work. We look at your business as an engine. We look at all of the gears inside the engine. We consider the totality of the business in contrast to people who show up and in contrast to folks who show up and want to talk about, think that marketing is going to solve all your problems, or, doing vision traction organizer is going to solve all of your problems. Those are both very useful endeavors, but they're not going to solve all of your problems. By the way, this is a sample of one, but I took a biz equity and ran and just did a valuation against biz equity. We were $100,000 different than this one report, guys. This is not a conclusion, but I was interested that we were $100,000 delta on a $3 million value for the business. So the one thing that that makes us different, and Joseph, this is a point that Joseph hits on, is I like the biz equity tool, right? It is a good online calculation, very sophisticated calculation of value, right? There are lots of ways to get here. This one happens to be very approachable. Great. I know a number of people in the community are using. Nowhere in here, though, do we address value capacity, right? We address growth capacity, but in a roundabout way. We don't address value capacity at all. So this is their demo deck or their demo value report, which they were kind enough to send along. It calculates a value and gets into the financial rationale for the value. It's a very pretty report, but it doesn't address at all what to do about it, right? So anyway,
George, can I make a comment about that?
Please.
So the way I would compare it is how I think, I'm sure it's a wonderful tool, but I don't think it really has much value. I look at it like the difference between a CPA who does your taxes,
yep,
versus a CFO that does FP&A, right? Recording what happened in the past and what's there is only helpful to a certain point. Yep. You can't do FP&A and help the company move forward and grow. It's quite frankly of limited value. So, I see the same way. I've gone through biz equity, and nothing against, the product they produce, but I don't think it has much of any value for people who do what we do.
Yeah. Your point is such a good one, Joseph, about, your point is a really good one. The difference between a historian and a strategist, right? And the mistake that business owners can make thinking that because they have a CPA, who are hardworking, dedicated, hell of a profession, but typically, unlike, Mike here, who's a forward-looking CPA, CPAs often are historians. And your point's a great one, Joseph. And then there's also the mistaking, sort of blurring bookkeeping, CPA, and CFO. And anyway, that was a really good point, Joseph. Anyone else? Chad, you look like you're deep in thought there.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I have this conversation, probably once to twice a week when some of my clients bring in, maybe their CPA, and, sometimes it can get a little awkward with that conversation.
A little?
Certainly not having to call out that CPA, but I'm having to do a really good job at differentiating what a CPA looks like from their lens, right, to my lens.
Yeah, and getting that, it is not as though the business owner does not, or the CEO does not need a CPA. That is far from the truth, right?
That's right.
It's a critical advisor at the table.
Absolutely.
And the right CPA can save the business owner a ton of money, especially now when I'm looking at Ed and Mike, especially as we're redesigning the business. We can take advantage of, of our Byzantine tax code. We can use it to our advantage, right? And help the business owner understand things like, you're going to get less at the deal table. Don't freak because you're going to get more into your account, that. But yeah. to the undercurrent here is you really need someone who has a sophisticated strategic view. C, it's just as a simple rule of thumb, I'm preaching to the choir. If there's a C in it, chief anything, that is a strategic role. And your chief financial officer should be thinking of cash and capital as a tool, and as a tool to move the business forward, and a lot of other things. But
yeah, no, I mean, just to piggyback off that, George, I mean, I encourage and I push for their CPA to get involved, early in the process, whether it's an M&A deal or not. I mean, hey, we're all pulling the same direction.
Yes.
Right. So, hey, I want to build a team, whether it's CPA, attorney, financial planner. I mean, hey, my philosophy is, bring in the team together. Everyone achieves more. Right.
Michael.
So George, George, I have a question for you. So this redesigned Clarity One platform, it's still going to have the equity value planner, right?
Oh yeah. Nothing. We're not losing any functionality. So
okay, cool.
Go ahead, please.
But to your Chad's point, your point about a CPA, right? I am one. I guess I am one, but I'm trying to recover. But when I take somebody through that, one of the inputs, right, in that analysis is your expected tax rate. Okay, so you could put in 20%, which is really it's pretty good rate, especially federal and state. In Florida, we don't have a state income tax, so it could be 20. But I tell people when I go through that, and I talk about their core team. I said your CPA plays a role here, because let's assume we could reduce that rate from whatever we have now to half of that amount. What effect would that have on your planning? And with the software, you could show it almost immediately. Yeah. So instead of having to grow 20% a year or whatever, 15% a year, you can cut your required growth rate down by quite a bit by having someone who is an income tax planner, who could find a way to reduce your overall tax rate, either by maybe using an ESOP for part of the sale, or some other strategy. Yep. If we can reduce that rate in half, look at the effect it has on your retirement. So that's that's where that's where I kind of highlight the role of their CPA. That's the role they should be there. And the other role is when we talk about long-term business debt, and that's something that will reduce equity value, right? Because you're going to have to pay off your long-term business debt. So maybe your CPA can help you figure out or construct a plan to pay that off over whatever your runway period is, 5 to 7 years. Let's work on paying off all your long-term debt, or at least reducing it. And the last thing they can do too is your profitability. If your profitability percentage is 5%, what if we made it 6%? What if your CPA can work with you to figure out and benchmark you against best in class, see where your holes are? So again, I know I'm overstating this, but there are many places where a CPA and their talent can be plugged in to the overall process.
Mike, and I would love to piggyback off that. I read an article not too long ago that talked about the CPA clients wished their CPA offered more services than the traditional tax accounting service.
Right. I know why they don't. I know why they don't. It's because and I've been in accounting firms, a few of them over my career. They're all buried in compliance and deadlines, and they're all working feverishly to get tax returns done, because we talk about this in Growth Drive, right? What are your recurring revenues? Do you have a great recurring revenue stream, right? Well, the annual compliance work is great recurring revenue, so they're hyper focused on that. And once they finish all that, you would think, well, now you have some time to do this consulting work, but no, they're just catching their breath and getting ready for the next push.
Yeah, I mean, my best clients are CPA firms. My best referral partners are CPA firms. Hands down.
That's actually great, Chad. So they're strategic COIs for you, right?
Well, they're critical. It's very difficult for us to do our work reliably if we don't have good numbers to work with.
Well, and that is the good people at BizEquity are not shy about saying they have the same problem we do. And one of their leading lights put it this way: gold in, gold out. And if it isn't gold, that's the implication, Mike. You're darn right. And we all laugh about it, right? We're like, well, do you have good financial reporting process? Yes, I do. Well, for the process of running the business as they're running it today, they probably have. They believe they have adequate financial reporting processes and veracity of numbers, and they believe, because they're living a pleasant. There are no bottlenecks there, and then and we can educate them. And there are a lot of systems like Growth Drive, like Scaling Up, that say, hey, wait a second, let's look, especially that's one of the things I really like about Vern's program, is he's one of the few people who's focusing on the numbers, on the money, and saying, you got to focus on this. He happens to use Cash Flow Story, great product, but let's get business flow in place and let's start making sure that these, let's start getting these numbers. Let's move them to the to a gold standard. Steve, you had a point you were going to make?
Just some miscellaneous comments. So I think Michael's an exit planner, but one of the first jobs of an exit planner is to sort through the advisors and find the good ones and the bad ones, and then somehow gently try to get rid of the bad ones. And could be the CPA, could be the attorney, could be whoever.
Mm-hmm. Same with the senior team, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I was in a meeting with a bunch of accountants last week, and the presentation was on the subject of tax. And lo and behold, most of the accountants' light bulbs started going off. They did a bunch of information about the tax issues that were presented. And thirdly, just another miscellaneous comment, since I play with numbers a little bit. Sometimes business owners are oblivious because they look at their P&Ls and balance sheets every month. Lo and behold, the account or the bookkeeping isn't worth the crap to put it in layman's terms. So what they're looking at is kind of useless. So, guys, for me at least, when someone sits across the table and tells me that the numbers that I trust and use are junk, I'm not experiencing that. So it's like there's a credibility gap there. There's a acceptance gap there. I remember so clearly I had a fractionalist CFO sitting. I always point. I was sitting at my desk and he had pulled the chair up right next to me, and he was giving me really good advice. But I didn't think I needed that advice. And no one had taken something like clarity and rubbed my nose in it and said, you know what, George, this is really good advice. And God damn it, if you don't take it, excuse the blasphemy, but darn it, if you don't take it, you're missing an opportunity. And luckily, I was forced to take it by something completely different. And decided to do a capital raise. We were going after another chunk of the market and preparing for the capital raise, et cetera, solve those problems. But it's hard, right, Steve, to get the business owner to get, and that's what business flow is designed to do. Any flash report is designed to do. Let's start putting these numbers down and look at week after week after week after week after week. And pretty soon, the fact that our numbers are not getting us, are not doing what they should, are not gold, it can't help but what does Shakespeare say? The truth will out, right? I think that was Shakespeare. I had a little anecdote a couple weeks ago. I was trying to work with a small business, and I was going to do financial analysis based on his P&Ls and balance sheets, and I got it, and it was just garbage. And I said, your bookkeeping's all messed up. And he said, well, I'm just using what the franchisor told me. So never trust anything.
Ed, what's your experience? Ed's a recovering CPA, an exit planner, an MBA.
Yeah, I think that's so typical, though, of what we see in a lot of the CPA firms, that they're so busy doing tax returns, they don't have time to do any discussions on it. And a lot of times they're working with data that was sent to them, not even talking to the person face to face. And it's one of the things I do when I consult with the CPA firms and said is, you can't send a tax return and file it electronically. You got to make sure you do a physical visit to the client, spend some time, and making sure what you're doing reflects where the business is at that time. Otherwise, you're going to lose the client because you're like everyone's talking. They're so busy doing recurring revenue, they don't have any time to talk to the client.
Well, and sitting down with your client and saying, hey, listen, this officer compensation is way out of whack. I know you like paying yourself $40,000 a month, but that's not what the market will bear. Who among us is excited to have that conversation, right? I mean, I wouldn't blanch from it, but now you're poking the bear.
But
as the companies get bigger, just to round out the point, but as the companies get bigger and more sophisticated, we see that starting to come in line because they have more sophisticated systems and other ways and they're getting better advice, right? To our point about bringing people around the table, and they're getting better advice about ways in which to remunerate themselves in a way that is good, that is better all the way around. Joseph, do you see that with the bigger companies?
No, you know what? It's interesting you say that. We sometimes we're so trapped in our own knowledge of the problem and the solution that we don't really see from the perspective of the client or the business owner. And it's very easy for us to overlay what we assume based on what, they're really experiencing. So I would say the following, that the transition from a business owner who has a lifestyle business to what I would call an investment, right? The same way you would buy a stock in the stock market. That's not an easy transition for people to make. So we have to understand really how they look at it and kind of ease them. Once they see it, I see the business as separate from themselves, they function totally different. And everyone has a different place, time and place and size of the business where they go into that transition. But I think that's a transition where we can really be very helpful and very effective with clarity and explain to them, look, would you go into the stock market and buy a company, that only had 5 people working and the CEO was doing everything and, doesn't have anything documented, everything is running the back of his head. How would you invest in a company like that? All of a sudden they're looking at it like, oh yeah, I get your point. And then you're going to kind of take them to the next step and next step and next step until their thought process will eventually evolve to see themselves almost as outside of the business as a financial manager for the money that they're investing into their business. Yeah. Right. So I don't know, and I don't always see that in the law. I've come across a couple of companies that have been at 25 million in revenue, even sometimes even a little bit larger, that really don't have a good handle. Even some topics we're talking about, like difference between what an accountant does and how FP&A has an impact on the business, because they haven't really developed their internal teams, like the executive teams. They don't have formal departments. They don't have, we call an official CFO versus a controller or a bookkeeper, or they don't have necessarily a formal sales and marketing department. So that, I go there. It changes from industry to industry, right? So obviously a professional services business it's going to happen earlier than it's likely to happen to a manufacturing company in different ways, probably because there's more profit, there's more money available to be spent, where in manufacturing, the profit margins might be lower. So they don't necessarily have the capital available to grow. So it happens all over the place. It's not always because they get larger that they get better.
Yeah, and just this is certainly not to be a CPA bash session by any means, but I'll give you an example. I mean, I've got 42 M&A deals that I'm working on right now. And I can easily say that over half of those, their books were absolutely in a mess when we started the process. And, do I blame the business owner for not keeping an eye on their books? Or do I blame the CPA firm? Now, all of a sudden, I catch them off guard and they're 6 months, behind on reconciling the books.
Yeah, it's not their fault. It's not, the accountant will do whatever the client tells them to do and what they're going to get paid for. That's simply that. That's the reality. The problem is the owner doesn't know what he doesn't know. Yeah. So the disconnect between not knowing what he doesn't know and what he really needs to know, and the accountant only doing work that he's going to get paid for, somewhere there has to be like an epiphany. And I expect that that's really our job. And I don't think we're really in conflict with the accountants. We can't do what we do or what we need to do without the CPAs.
Absolutely not.
I don't want to piss them off, but I think it's the realization that the accountant has to really understand what each person's real job function is. And, what you think a CPA is supposed to be doing and what is supposed to be encompassed in all of his qualities really depends on what you're directing him to do. And that may or may not be the same thing.
Right. No, I agree, Joseph.
Yep. It's interesting. We're also seeing it's hard to say a trend, but we are seeing consulting firms, business advisory, management consulting firms purchasing CPA firms and gluing them in. I think, was it Cerity who just did that? We're seeing, there's some interesting movement, and I don't mean to, let's not go down this rabbit hole, but some interesting movement in the market. Eisner Amper was purchased by private equity. You have BDO just doing an ESOP, right? It's an interesting time out there. And yeah, it's an interesting time.
To piggyback on what Joseph was saying a couple of minutes ago, but I've run across a couple of businesses recently in the, 20, 30 million revenue range. And so I think the quality of the management techniques, the bookkeeping, that sort of thing, kind of depends on where the company started. These two companies that I'm talking about, they basically were people that were good at X, and they started at zero and worked, and they're really good at that. And they grew to measurable revenue, but their habits didn't change. Their knowledge didn't change. They didn't turn into MBAs or CPAs or whatever. So I think it depends on the type of company and how it started.
Well, yeah, we all overlook the fact that, companies sub 1 million all operated exactly the same way. And companies over, let's say, 100 million also operate almost exclusively the same way. There's a huge amount of transition that occurs in how a company is run and operated, from primarily, let's say, around $5 million to, let's say, $50 to $75 million. That stage over there, it's constantly evolving in many, many, many ways, from management to systems, operations, processes, cash flows, the whole business, marketing, the creation of departments. It's constantly evolving, over that growth stage. And that's, not easy for a lot of people to capture.
No, and then the name of the game is educating our clients, Joseph. You hit on it earlier. When we sit down and we have the growth conversation, how do we educate the client and help them come to their own conclusion about, what's going well and where they're just bottlenecks, right? This is, that may be a severe bottleneck but these are bottlenecks to growing the business, and let's or blind spots, whatever you want to call them. Let's shine a light on them and fix them. But to your point, Joseph, the client needs to come to the conclusion. We can't, what am I trying to say? What's your experience in trying to just tell the client rather than showing them? And
yeah, usually one of the best questions I've come across is if you tell the client, I mean, I'm not talking about obviously for someone who's about to sell their company, but if you're having a discussion with a client and say to them, okay, you know what, let's say your dream comes true and all of a sudden you have 5 times as many clients sitting at your front door. How's that going to work? What's the outcome going to be like? Implode or things will be really, really good, right? And I think when they start to think of it that way, they realize that they probably don't have as good a handle on their business as they would like to think, and they're probably at that point they're more open to listening on how to improve so that actually can happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you tell the typical, it's something we've talked about before. If you tell the typical CEO, I'm going to help you grow I'm going to help you double revenues. Well, their first reaction is, hallelujah, that's going to solve all my problems. And the challenge is that it probably won't, right? That's what you're hitting on. You're doing a 5 times growth, but it doesn't solve all your problems.
Yeah, I had someone call me last week. He's a roofing and construction business, and he's moving out of residential into commercial application for some of the larger firms. And he ended up getting one really big client. Except one client is asking for 60 days with no upfront payment, and what's happening is he doesn't have the cash to fund the growth. And it's potentially, $6 million in incremental revenue if he just has a way to finance it. He's been looking for all kinds of ways of financing. The banks have turned to him and said, listen, you have $1.5 million in revenue, and it's wonderful that your EBITDA is running around $1 million, but you can't carry $5 million in paper. You got to figure, things the way out. So, I got to get a partner. Well, so they're not really built for that kind of growth, and it's hard for them to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we sit down with clarity and walk them through these questions and show them, try to help them understand what best practices might look like. And if you guys, and this is one of the key additions to the clarity report, is go back and look at these questions again and ask yourself what it would feel like to have a business where you answered yes to all of these. And the questions are there in a stack. And if you start checking the boxes, it's, for me at least, it's compelling. It'll be interesting to hear what your experience is in the market. Chad's doing some home decorating, business decorating.
Yeah, I've got you on mute. Sorry, guys.
Oh no, don't. It's not a problem, man. Not a problem whatsoever. Well, guys, 10:15. How's everyone for time?
I'm going to have to sign off. I've got to get ready for another
10:30 call.
Okay. I kind of figured.
Thanks,
and we're
guys.
trying to keep these. This is a great conversation, guys, and I will publish this. I'll publish this later today. So thank you, everyone, and have a great week. And Joseph, I've taken a note, and thank you very much for that offer. So we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys.
Have a good day, gents. Bye.
Bye.